So, yeah, for the 12 of you or so who are subscribed and wondering where I've been for the past 2 months, well, as the title of the video says, I went to Sundance. Yeah, the Sundance Film Festival. Basically, every year my school takes about 10 students to Sundance for a week, and for this year, I was one of those 10 students. In the third week of January, we flew out to Park City, Utah, and basically spent a week watching movies. So, what is Sundance? Some of you might have a passing knowledge. Basically, Sundance is a film festival for independent movies. A lot of the time, new filmmakers will premiere movies here in hopes of getting distribution. Basically, studios will often acquire the distribution rights for films here, who will then distribute those films in theaters later on in the year. Okay, before we get into what I actually saw at Sundance, let's go over the different categories. Basically, there are several different categories that films will premiere in, usually sorted by the type of movie or if it's eligible for awards or whatever. First are the competition categories. Basically, these are the movies that are in competition for awards at Sundance, either the jury or the audience awards. These are split into 4 categories: US Dramatic, US Documentary, World Cinema Dramatic, or World Cinema Documentary. Next is the premiere section. These are basically movies that are premiering at Sundance, but aren't going to be eligible for the actual awards. This is sort of like the miscellaneous category of movies that aren't competing but don't fit into the other niche categories. Okay, then is the midnight section. Okay, the midnight section is a lot of fun. This is basically where they have all the horror movies or where they have a lot of the weirder, more out there movies. Now, the section is called Midnight because all the movies here would actually play at midnight, but I think they've stopped doing that because none of the movies I saw in the section screened at midnight. They still screened pretty late, and the latest I did get out of a movie was around 1 in the morning, but it's no longer a midnight screening. Okay, next is the, next section. This is where they have the more experimental movies. So basically, if you want a movie that doesn't play by the rules of filmmaking, you're going to want to look at next. There's usually something pretty interesting playing here. Next is the spotlight section. So all the other sections feature movies that are premiering at Sundance, that is, they've never screened anywhere else before. You're literally among the first people in the world to watch these movies. The spotlight section is for movies that basically aren't premiering at Sundance. They're still new movies that aren't publicly released yet. They just maybe first premiered at another festival, and Sundance still wants to highlight these movies. Then they have the episodic section for television series and short films, which are pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so you're all probably wondering what I actually saw at Sundance, and if I saw anything that's good. So in about a week, I managed to watch 17 movies. So basically for my class, there were 5 movies that everyone in the class had to watch. The first was a documentary called Daughters, which premiered in the US documentary category. It basically follows a program in Washington, D.C. prisons where incarcerated fathers are given a chance to have a dance with their young daughters. Now, I'm not the best at judging the artistic quality of documentaries. I'm just more used to fictional films. But I can say that this seemed to be a pretty well put together documentary. They did a really good job of getting you to empathize with the fathers. Since they never actually say what the fathers are in prison for, you end up looking past that and just seeing them as regular people in an unfortunate situation. They also do a great job of showing how this affects the entire family and not just the men incarcerated. Also, this was a very emotional movie. Literally everyone in the theater was crying. This was also one of the biggest hits of the festival. It ended up winning both the Audience Award in US Documentary Competition and the overall Audience Favorite Award. If you're interested, I think it's definitely worth checking out. which you'll be able to since Daughters recently got acquired by Netflix. So if you have Netflix, be sure to be on the lookout for Daughters. Then I saw In the Land of Brothers, which premiered in the World Dramatic category. It's an Iranian film that basically follows one family of Afghan refugees over the span of 20 years as they deal with the struggle of being refugees with being harassed by authorities or trying not to get deported and all that. The film isn't an anthology movie, but it's kind of structured like one. Basically, the first 30 minutes will follow one family member and something that they're dealing with. Then it skips over 10 years, follows a new member of the family, and so on. It's a pretty hard-hitting film and it's very well shot. The final shot of the movie in particular is just like absolutely devastating. I will say that personally the third storyline didn't quite thematically connect as well as the other two storylines did, but it's still well written and well directed and definitely overall a great movie. This actually won the jury award for directing in the World Dramatic category. But as of me recording this, the movie hasn't been picked up for distribution quite yet. Then I saw The Mugai, which is a horror movie that premiered in the midnight section. It's basically about a mother who, after giving birth to her second child, is convinced that a monster is trying to steal her children. And, let's see, how do I put this lightly? This movie is, it's not good. This is the moment when you learn that just because a movie got into Sundance doesn't necessarily mean it's actually a good movie. The Mugai is just a really cliche and a predictable horror movie. Based on the description, I was like expecting it to be something like Hereditary or The Babadook. And it was basically like those movies, but just way, way worse. It's basically filled with nothing but jump scares, and every beat of the movie is very, very predictable. And the entire third act is just like a normie action movie with a very, very badly designed monster. Like all the other movies I saw at Sundance, even if some of them weren't very good, they were at least creative and interesting enough to where I could at least understand why they got into Sundance. The Mugai is the one movie where I was actually confused as to why it got in. I mean, okay, I know why. There's this like metaphor that the movie is going for where the monster of the Mugai is actually a metaphor for the stealing of Aboriginal children, which, to be fair, the metaphor does work really, really well. It just deserves a way better movie than this. So far, the Mugai hasn't been picked up for distribution yet, but don't worry, you're not really missing much with this one. Then I saw Didi, which premiered in the US Dramatic competition. Didi is basically this coming-of-age comedy drama following a 13-year-old Taiwanese boy growing up in California. I would say Didi is probably the second best movie I saw while at Sundance. It's a lot like movies like Lady Bird and 8th Grade, which itself is a Sundance movie. It has some great performances and humor. It was the one movie where the entire audience was audibly reacting to everything that was going on in the story, which I personally always love. This was also a pretty big hit at the festival, as it ended up winning the jury award for ensemble and the audience award for the US Dramatic competition. It also got acquired by Focus Features, so it'll probably theatrically release later this year. Okay, so I just found out that Didi is unfortunately releasing on the exact same day as the new Deadpool movie, which, okay, I know you guys love Deadpool. I know he's a popular character. I know many of you are probably looking forward to that movie. I know many of you are probably excited to see Hugh Jackman return as Wolverine, even though he had the perfect exit in Logan. I know many of you are probably excited for that movie, but please, please, at least consider going to see Didi. It's a very fun, very sweet, very hilarious movie. You won't be disappointed, and it deserves the attention. It just has the very unfortunate, terrible decision to release on the same day as one of the most anticipated movies of this year. So just, please go see Deadpool, then right after go see Didi, please. It deserves it. Then I saw In a Violent Nature, which is a slasher movie that premiered in the midnight section. It's basically a slasher movie, but told from the killer's perspective rather than the victim's perspective. I describe it best as like an art house slasher movie. It's a very slow burn. The filming style is very similar to Gus Van Sant's Elephant. Cinematography and sound design are amazing, and it gets pretty tense, especially in the last 20 minutes. There are also some pretty crazy kills. There's this one kill that is probably the most violent and one of the craziest kills I have ever seen in a slasher movie. It's like, I didn't know the human body could do that, and I don't want to find out if it actually can. I wouldn't say it's quite as fun as other slasher movies, but if you're interested, it's definitely worth checking out. There's already a small trailer out for this one, and it's set to release on the horror streaming service Shudder later this year. So if you have Shudder and you like slashers, definitely check this one out. Let's see. Then I saw The Mother of All Lies, which screened in the Spotlight section. This is an Arabian documentary that follows the family of the director. Essentially, the director's grandmother was this super strict woman who didn't allow any photographs, so the entire family has no pictures of themselves. So the director had the entire family recreate moments of their lives using dolls and elaborate models. And the film basically uses that to explore her family history and the history of the country. It's honestly pretty interesting, and the film gets pretty harrowing at times, especially certain moments when the family has to relive dark moments in the country's past, such as this riot where 600 people died. And the presentation doesn't take away from the impact of learning about these things. The movie actually premiered at the Cannes Film Festival about a year earlier and was actually shortlisted for the Oscars recently for International Feature Film. Then I saw Love Me, which premiered in the US Dramatic Competition, and is essentially a love story between a buoy and a satellite. Yeah, you heard that right. So the first third plays out very similarly to the first act of WALL-E, and it was probably the strongest part of the film. The rest of the film is still decently good, though it gets into this weird animation style that is kind of off-putting, and I also think that the ending of the film could have been more emotional and poignant than it was, considering what the story was going for. I obviously can't get into too much detail without spoilers, but you guys probably get the idea. I should also add that this was easily the most divisive movie at Sundance. I've heard people who absolutely loved this movie and people who absolutely hated this movie, and I was sort of right in the middle, I guess. I'd rate it a 7 out of 10, but this is probably a movie that you kind of have to see for yourself and form your own opinion on. So far, there's no distributor for it, but it's a creative film and it does star Kristen Stewart and Steven Yeun, so it'll probably get some sort of release. Then I saw Freaky Tales, which premiered in the premiere section. It's essentially 4 interconnected stories taking place in Oakland in 1987. The first story is about a punk rock nightclub that gets harassed by neo-Nazi skinheads, and the nightclub patrons decide to fight back. The second story is about a rapper duo who get invited into a rap battle with a relatively more well-known rapper. The third story is about a mob enforcer who tries to escape his life, and the fourth story is about a basketball player who goes on a revenge mission after his house is robbed. Now, a lot of people really like this movie. It was a lot of fun, and it is pretty enjoyable at times. I ultimately thought it was just kind of fine, I guess. I thought that the whole wasn't quite as strong as the sum of its parts, and I often felt like it was trying a little too hard to be a Tarantino movie at times. I also don't think that all the storylines connected as well as they could have. Mainly, the rapper storyline doesn't actually connect with the other three storylines that much. I mean, it's still a good storyline, it just doesn't really have that much of a connection, really. I feel like it was a lot of fun in the moment, though I'm not sure how much I'll actually remember it years from now. There's no distributor yet, but it stars Pedro Pascal and it was directed by the same duo who directed Captain Marvel, and it was a pretty fun, like, sort of action adventure movie, so it'll probably get distribution soon. Then I saw Brief History of a Family, which premiered in the World Dramatic Competition. It's a Chinese psychological thriller that's honestly pretty hard to describe without giving too much away. All I'll say is that it follows a family who takes in their son's mysterious and reclusive best friend, and after that, secrets get revealed and tensions begin to rise, I guess. And honestly, this movie was amazing. This was easily the best film I saw at Sundance by far. I was completely on the edge of my seat the entire time. The story takes all these twists and turns, and tension just keeps rising until the conclusion. The movie looks gorgeous, it has some amazing music. Overall, it's just a really incredible film. And what's more is that this was the director's first feature, and like it's one of those debuts where like you can't tell that it's his first film at all. Not only was this the best film I saw at Sundance, but if it had released last year, I probably would have listed it as the best film of last year as well. There's already a trailer out for it, and it was recently acquired by Films Boutique, so definitely be on the lookout for it. Then I saw Malu, which also premiered in the World Dramatic Competition. It's this Brazilian film that follows an aging mother who tries to build a theater in her own town and eventually is dealing with dementia. This film had some of the best performances I saw at Sundance, and there were some pretty well-written scenes, especially towards the end. The final scene and the final few shots in particular I thought were really good and hard-hitting. It overall didn't really blow me away or anything, and I was still reeling from how amazing Brief History of a Family was, but it's still pretty good. Unfortunately, there's no distribution set for this movie yet. Then I got sick. Yeah, I woke up the next day feeling horribly sick. I had terrible sore throat, I was coughing, I had chills, and I was incredibly nauseous. But it's gonna take more than that to keep me from watching movies. Fortunately, a few years ago, Sundance began online screenings of most of the movies, where basically you could buy online tickets, and during your last few days at Sundance, you can stream them wherever. In fact, you don't even have to be in Utah. You can literally be wherever in the world and still watch your movies. I even watched my last two movies online after I flew back from Utah. So I basically bought online tickets to the movies that I had in-person tickets for that day, so I was still able to catch a few movies despite being sick. So first I saw Handling the Undead, which premiered in the World Dramatic Competition. It's basically a movie that chronologizes the beginning of a zombie apocalypse, where people don't really know what's going on. All they know is that their loved ones who recently died are suddenly alive again. It's an interesting concept, and it honestly had a great dark tone and some incredible music and cinematography, and it actually won the jury prize for music. Though overall it felt a little, underwhelming for me. I thought that the characters were underdeveloped and the movie took a little too long to get to its point. Ultimately, it felt more like an interesting concept than anything. However, I was incredibly sick and tired when I started the movie, so I admit that that may have impacted my viewing of the movie. If you saw it and you think my critiques aren't actually very accurate, please let me know and I might give it a rewatch now that I'm feeling better for the most part. It's set to be distributed by Nordisk Film, and there's already a trailer out for it. Then I saw A Good One, which premiered in the US Dramatic Competition. It's basically a coming-of-age story following a girl on a camping trip dealing with the competing egos of her father and her father's best friend. And this movie was a good one. Okay, in all seriousness, this was actually a good movie. It had a great screenplay that really did characterizations well, and the star, Lily Kulas, was very good. I think she has a great career ahead of her. The film seems like it meanders a lot, but honestly, in the last few scenes, the entire story really comes together very nicely. I was worried that this film wasn't going to get distribution, but literally a few days before recording this, it was picked up by Metagraph Pictures, so hopefully you guys will get a chance to see it soon. Next day was my last day at Sundance, and fortunately I was feeling a bit better, so I actually got to see movies in person again. First, I saw A Real Pain, which premiered in the US Dramatic Competition. This film was actually written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg and stars him and Kieran Culkin as cousins who go on a Holocaust tour after their Polish grandmother dies. This was honestly a pretty good and surprisingly fun movie. Jesse Eisenberg is a really good writer and director, and there were some pretty well-written scenes throughout the movie. Both he and Kieran Culkin are really good in the movie, even if they basically are just playing themselves. Jesse Eisenberg acts pretty much exactly how I suspect he acts in real life, and Kieran Culkin is basically playing the exact same character he played on Succession, just this time way more likable. I also felt like the movie was like setting up this character arc for Jesse Eisenberg's character that never quite gets paid off, and kind of makes me wonder what the whole point of the movie was. But it's still a very fun and enjoyable comedy drama that's, I think, definitely worth checking out. It actually won the Jury Award for screenwriting and was acquired by Searchlight Pictures, and it was like the first major acquisition of the entire festival, so I can guarantee you will be hearing about this later on. Then I saw Presence, which premiered in the premiere section. This is sort of a horror movie about a family who moves into a new house and discover that there's a ghost there. And okay, I know that sounded so basic, but I honestly don't really know how else to describe the plot. Which sucks because this is actually a pretty creative ghost story, especially since it's basically shot from the perspective of the ghost. You never see the ghost, but the camera literally floats through the house like a ghost. And there are a lot of long takes and it looks pretty amazing. The last shot in particular was my favorite. It also had a pretty well told story and it really came together in the end. So if you like ghost stories, you'll probably like this one. It was acquired by Neon and it was directed by Steven Soderbergh and sorta stars Lucy Liu, so you're definitely going to hear about this later on. Let's see. Then I saw Love Lies Bleeding, which premiered in the midnight section. So this is a thriller about a bodybuilder who falls in love with a gym manager, then slowly gets dragged into the gym manager's criminal family. This was honestly a really good and pretty tense movie. If you like Coen Brothers movies, you'll probably like this a lot. It has a similar plot to movies like Fargo and No Country for Old Men, where innocent people accidentally get wrapped up in a criminal plot and the walls like slowly close in as the movie progresses. It was also just a lot of fun because I initially didn't plan on seeing this movie. It was a very last minute decision, more on that later. So I knew literally nothing about it going in, which made it all the more fun while watching it. I will say that this movie had a pretty weird ending. It doesn't completely jump the shark, but it does get pretty close. I think the weird part can be read as more metaphorical, and it doesn't completely ruin the movie. It's still a very fun thriller, and the audience was honestly pretty into it. But, you know, it's there. This movie not only has 2 trailers out for it, but it's actually set to release really, really soon, like in early March. So if you were interested in seeing it and was wondering how it was, I can say that it was one of the better movies I saw while at Sundance and is definitely worth checking out. Let's see, then I saw Exhibiting Forgiveness, which premiered in the US Dramatic Competition. It's basically this drama about an artist who uses his art exhibit to try to forgive his abusive father. It was honestly a pretty good movie. Obviously, the themes were pretty well developed, and it does a good job of balancing the present day in which the protagonist is trying to forgive his father and the flashbacks where it actually shows the abuse. There's also some pretty good dialogue and music as well, though I overall found it to be one of the less memorable movies at Sundance. Though, I mean, it's still pretty good. As of right now, there is no set distribution for the movie yet. The last film I saw at Sundance was Little Death, which premiered in the next category. This is a weird movie, and while I can't say it's good, it was definitely interesting. I will say that in order to talk about it, I will have to spoil it, so just skip to this timestamp if you don't want that. Basically, the first half of the film is about a screenwriter named Martin Solomon, who's played by David Schwimmer, who's this frustrated, misogynistic, paranoid screenwriter who's trying to retain creative control over his script. The film basically sets up this character arc and has this frantic, almost fourth wall breaking style that feels very Charlie Kaufman-esque. It's actually a pretty interesting setup. Then halfway through the movie, some robbers break into Martin's house and Martin dies. And literally nothing that was set up in the first half gets brought up ever again throughout the rest of the movie. All of that character development is just gone, and basically the second half of the movie has a more traditional film style as it follows two teens trying to get their stuff back from the robbers. Obviously, I can't really call it good, but it is interesting. I've never seen a movie just completely disregard everything in the first half and essentially just do a complete 180 on everything. Again, it's not good, but it's definitely very interesting. Okay, so say you're interested in actually going to Sundance. How does that work? Is there anything you should know before going to Sundance? Well, basically, you're gonna want to buy your tickets ahead of time. Also, tickets to showings sell out fast, so you have to be sure to be on it. You're gonna want to plan out your day while purchasing tickets, so take into account stuff like travel time, meals, and line waiting when buying your tickets. So at Sundance, a general rule of thumb is that you're going to want to show up to the theater at least an hour and no sooner than 30 minutes before the showtime actually starts. So if the movie starts at 4, you're going to want to show up at least at 3:30, but preferably at 3. This way you're guaranteed to get good seats. You don't want to show up right before the movie starts, because if, for example, you wait until 3:50 to get into that 4 p.m. showing, at that point, they would have assumed that you just didn't show up, and it's very likely that even though you bought a ticket, that they'll give that ticket to someone in the waitlist line, so be sure to get there early. Next are the venues. So there are a wide variety of venues or theaters at Sundance. Some are regular movie theaters, and others, like the library, are places that are refurnished for Sundance screenings. Now, if you don't have a car, you can fortunately take the shuttle between theaters. They have shuttles that basically drive from theater to theater, and what's super convenient is that these shuttles are 100% free. I didn't have to pay for a single bus ride while at Sundance. Park City, which is where I was at, was small enough that you could pretty much take shuttles wherever you needed to go. Now, most of the venues are within 5 to 7 minutes of each other, except for Redstone Theater, which for some reason is way out here. In order to get to Redstone, you gotta hike up a mountain and cross the desert and then get in a boat and row across the Atlantic. And just kidding, it's only a 30-minute bus ride, but still, for Park City, it's a strange venue to have a 30-minute bus ride. Anyway, once you're actually inside the screening, usually an announcer will introduce the movie along with the movie's director if they're present. After the movie, if the director is there, there will usually be a Q&A that will last about 15 minutes. Oftentimes the cast will be there too, which is pretty cool. For In a Violent Nature, literally the entire cast was there, which was super cool. So say you want to get into a movie, but it's sold out. What do? Do you just give up on life? Not at all. You join a waitlist. So basically, the waitlist is for people who want to see a movie that's sold out. Now, joining a waitlist doesn't guarantee that you'll see the movie, but it does give you a pretty good chance. Essentially, if there are ticket holders to a movie that's sold out who don't show up, Sundance will start to give those seats to people in the waitlist. So, how do you join a waitlist? Basically, 2 hours before the movie starts, the waitlist will open up online. And you want to join the waitlist as soon as it opens up. So if the movie you want to waitlist for starts at, say, 4 o'clock, at 1:59 you need to be on the app or on the website and ready to reload the second it turns to 2 o'clock. As soon as it does, the option to join a waitlist will show up, and you need to click on it as soon as possible. Once you click on it, you'll be given a number based on how many people ahead of you have already joined the waitlist. So like if you're the first person to click join waitlist, you'll be number 1. If you're the 25th person, you'll be number 25. Then about an hour before the showtime, you'll show up at the theater and everyone will line up in according to their number. Around 5 to 10 minutes before the showing, they'll start to let people in numerical order. This is also why it's important to get as high on the waitlist as possible. Usually people within the first 10 to 15 numbers on the waitlist are pretty much guaranteed to get into the movie, whereas everyone after that is a bit of a gamble. However, I was number 51 on the waitlist to presents, and not only did I still get in, but there were still around 15 people who were let in after me. Just be sure to show up early, as if you show up to the waitlist line too late, you'll be put in the back of the line regardless of what number you have. And don't worry, you don't get charged for the movie until they actually scan your ticket when they let you in, so simply joining a waitlist is completely free. But even placing high on the waitlist doesn't guarantee you'll make it into the movie, which leads me to my next point. The pass holder system is complete garbage. What's a pass holder? Nobody knows, but the system is garbage. Okay, I'm sure some of people probably know, but I tried doing research and I couldn't figure out if pass holders were people who volunteered at Sundance, or it was an expensive ticket package, or whatever. But the system screwed me out of a movie. So, story time. After I got to Sundance, there was this movie everyone was talking about called I Saw the TV Glow, which was part of the midnight section. It's basically about these two teens who discover a mysterious late night TV show that suddenly gets canceled, and afterwards, weird stuff starts happening to them. It sounds super interesting, right? Well, I decided, hey, that sounds like something I would really enjoy. But the only showing I could make was all the way down in Salt Lake City, which was also sold out. But I really wanted to see this movie, so I got an Uber, and it takes me about an hour to get down there. I joined the waitlist, and I end up getting number 4 on the waitlist. I'm thinking, I'm getting there early, I'm number 4 on the waitlist, I'm guaranteed to get into this movie. I go to the theater, and apparently pass holders get first dibs on every movie, even among ticket holders. And apparently there were so many pass holders for the showing that even people who bought tickets weren't getting into the movie, which means that they let in no one from the waitlist. Okay, the night wasn't a total bust because I decided to instead last minute join the waitlist for Love Lies Bleeding, which I obviously got into. And honestly, I don't think I would have seen Love Lies Bleeding at all if it hadn't been for this mishap, which ended up being one of my favorite movies of the festival, so it all ended up working out in the end. I'm still looking forward to seeing I Saw the TV Glow, and while there's no set release for it, it's from A24, it stars Justice Smith, and it was obviously one of the most popular and acclaimed movies of the festival, so it's pretty much guaranteed to get a wide release, so I'll definitely be watching it once it hits theaters. Anyway, that was basically my experience at Sundance. Overall, it was a really cool experience. It was honestly a lot of fun seeing so many great movies in such a short span of time, and while it's difficult to do, I would honestly recommend it for pretty much anyone. They have all sorts of cool movies there, so no matter what kinds of movies that you like, you're pretty much bound to find something that you'll find cool or interesting. If you can make it to Sundance, I do recommend it. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.